And the river still shines and shimmers in the light as it did in our grandfather's day, when they rode all night to fish in the morning and lived in Willapa Bay.
Looking for Shannon Zellerhoff. I understand that she, and this is her second year here, fished for 10 years, mostly Bering Sea. Is that right? And crab, longline, occasional Bristol Bay. A merchant sailor, a sister of mine. I was a merchant sailor long ago. Well, come on up. Good to see you.
Good evening, everyone. Before I begin, I'd just like to thank everyone that put this together for the 24th year. It's really powerful stuff to have journaled and written and collected writings, and after all that time, finally make it on board the Fisher Poets boat. So my background is commercial fishing in the Bering Sea. I cut my teeth on the Arrow with David Kelly, Charlie Tuna. They're from Clatsop County, and was desperate to get out onto the crab boats. Is that better? So for some sick reason, I fell in love with Opilio season, and thankfully when I was 10, my mom gave me a journal, and she said, "You're going to want to remember the things you did in your life, so write them all down." And most of these poems are on their like 50th iteration from journals that I wrote after like 20, 40, 60. Mike Engel on the Shelikoff, 64 hours we did on deck. So a lot of that stuff would just scribble off the margins, and over the last 30 years of my life I've been trying to make it distilled so that the experience can live on. All right, so this first poem is called Ode to the Carrick Bend. God, I wear readers now. My poetry was cut from frozen line, severed like the eternal link we grunted at, then hammered apart over the rail. Nothing represented the union we felt between the soles of our boots and the bottom of the sea, like the Carrick Bend did. Sometimes daydreams and reveries arose unpleasantly, like that rotting stench from the rust-stained bins sinking, storm by storm, into the soft Aleutian mud. When the ice pack came down, squeezing us south off our lucrative grounds, my thoughts seemed useless, like the hacked-off clumps of polypropylene and nylon knots. Ashore, to lick my wounds, I peeled phrases off my skin like scabs. From dim recollections of otherwise incomprehensible observations, the detritus of last trip's guilty sorrows emerged. Like a translucent sun, after weeks of winter rain, my thoughts crystallized. What would an archaeologist have to say from our waste? What would this intransigent sea say if I did not speak for it? Often, I became overwhelmed by my existential angst. My head, balanced on an edgy precipice of sleep deprivation and battle-charged euphoria for crab, demanded I ignore the raven's eyes, those shaggy gendarmes of the Bering Sea. When at last we made that long, long run north and west, back to the grounds, nearly to Petropavlovsk, I took up an intermittent residence in the crucible of my sleep. But it was not the boat slowing down or the whine of the hydraulics that called me back from the sleep. It was not the rejuvenating odor of the frying bacon the cook was doing in the galley. It was the impatient meditation forged before an unforgiving horizon, lachrymose and white. Words were wanting out of my head. And resurrected, I sat with my pen clenched in a stubborn hand that would not close, forfeiting even coffee to make my manifest mark. Thank you. This second one, for those of you who remember Peggy Dyson, WBH-29 Kodiak on the single sideband, that's how we got our weather back then. And so this is kind of a nod to Peggy and just some memories. It's called Area 12 Alpha, please. I take a look at the calendar, swinging like a pendulum across the bulkhead. To keep things light, the captain has taken to marking down my occupation du jour. On the 8th, I was going to quit fishing, join the Navy. On the 11th, I was dreaming about moving someplace warm, become a peanut farmer. By the 17th, our pots hauling water, I was missing my cousin's horses, and I became dead set on the Dakotas for a week. I swore every day that I'd quit the sea for good, hire out as a cowboy, cutting steer through the snow on a Mustang named Butte. After anchor watch, I walked towards the stern with a black garbage bag, faced the wind, opened it up, pretended it was a sail. I started stuffing in the garbage the gulls had pulled out. Figured it was high time to go back to Nassau or Camden, anywhere with a yawl or a ketch or a sloop. Task completed, I sat down on a bright pink buoy to listen to the quiet of the harbor. You could hear the waves rake the side of the hull with a rasping sigh. From the wheelhouse, familiar radio chatter, the awful low price set down for our crab, the awful high price of fuel and bait, the stale donuts the greenhorn stole from the cannery galley. You would think we had all been marched down to this vocation at gunpoint. But our once lofty dreams were cut down occasionally by that threat of the early death, which rang around our eyes like the years on a stump. Area 12 Alpha, please. Thank you. When I first got to Dutch Harbor, it was in June 1991, I think. We went in on the Arrow, and everything was verdant green, and the salmon berries were luscious and red, and we were out at the spit, and this ancient old blue station wagon came down, and there was this beautiful woman with a bandana on her head and 2 cases of beer, and her name was Verla Robinson. Over the years, I was crab fishing up there. I'd often fly into Dutch with $5, because in those days, if you remember, you could go from A to B for $5. So Verla took me in a lot, and she was kind of my mom. And this poem's dedicated to her. Ode to Verla Robinson. Winter mistook the limp codfish lying on the metal dock for a used sock. Then it passed its cold, arbitrary face across eyeballs no longer fresh, leaving those roomy globes for the raven's beak to worry. One of the harbor lights flickered and dimmed, and the leaden clouds let down their snow. Fine dendrite crystals fell from the perihelion glow of the moon, silvering down into the mud blanketing of the dock into white. A raft of harlequin ducks paddled by, silent as cordwood floating on the ebb. In the grease ice, they left no wake. From the shore, the canneries and their generators sang an industrial composition into the Aleutian breeze. The groaning of forklifts trotting along barked their tines against wooden cleats. Vats of pollock and cod guts steamed like small refineries. One trawler winked like a star as she bent around the reef. And everyone was tucked inside those quaint, war-remembered cabanas with their benevolent oil stoves and their frost-paned windows, out of which gazed their cats and their dogs and their reliquaries. The vertebrae of a humpback whale sitting dusty beside a broken narwhal tusk, glass floats and baleen, books wedging down last summer's pressed flowers, the cylinder from the old Detroit engine jammed against the door, and that coal-black sketch a soldier once made of a cloud leaning over the hill where Verla once told me the herring shack stood when the mailboat of her namesake used to steam west over shoals of herring and banks of cod. Thank you all very much. Have a great night.
Now blow the gentle wind o'er the dark blue sea, no more will stay thy hand, since Willie is safe at home with me in his own dear native land.
So I'm very lucky to have Mary with us. Mary presented last night at FisherPoets Gathering. And Mary, I so enjoyed your performance. Can you tell me more about your work?
It's not really work the way I do it. They just sort of come to me and I just write them down. That's about it. And I see all these people really, really work. And I feel guilty because I'm not really, really working. But I think there's stories out there or people out there that want to be talked about or that they want to give us their stories. So I'd like to have a song about a boarding house lady up there and canneries and some women, not probably half and half, men and women, but some of the shore things as well. Mm-hmm. I think it's very important.
Well, Mary, you're lucky that they'll just come to you and you can share them with all of us. What would you like to share with other people about the Fisher Poets Gathering and why they should come and maybe tips?
Yeah, definitely should come, and it's a great amount of fun. The weather this year is perfect. It's been snowing and icing before, but it's perfect this year. And it's just incredible history, and you have to sort of look for where stuff is because it's sort of spread out, but there's stuff in the library, stuff in probably the Maritime Museum still, I think. And down at Pier 39 there's a lot of stuff in the center part of town. It's just really great, and some of the places have food and drink as well. It doesn't get better.
Mary, anything else you want to share with us?
No, I'm just very honored to be here. I'm not really a fisher myself. The greatest respect. I've worked in fisheries research and have some. I lived in Newfoundland, so I got a lot of experience there, but I'm not exactly a fisher. I'm not at all. I would last 5 minutes on a boat and I'd be swept overseas even if it was calm.
Mary, thank you so much for sharing your time with us today.
Thank you.
Take care.